Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Health Podcast with my co host, David Ortega, a holistic health coach. And today we are actually talking about it's something that we mentioned in our last episode of Beyond the Diagnosis, is actually looking at ancestral patterns. So today we're looking at healing ancestral patterns through the body. And this is great in the sense that there is a lot of evidence of intergenerational illnesses as well as intergenerational traumas, and how it kind of like starts to show up from the body. So I'll let you go first, David, with talking about, illnesses that are perhaps passed down from generation to generation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are two big, let's say, big paradigms about these ancestral diseases or ancestral ailments that we can have. One is, of course, the genes and how we inherit some of those genes. And the other one is about the epigenetics of the disease, that we understand that we have in our family tree that gene, and probably we have it. I mean, that requires, of course, a genetic testing. But if you know that you have the gene, that doesn't mean that you are going to develop the disease, because now we know that the environment is more powerful than the genetics. And we also know that less than 1% of chronic diseases are really genetic. So they are rare. They are marked, of course, by that inheritance, but you have 99% of chances of healing that disease with the environment that you are creating. And that means that you need to be curious about the things that your family deal with in terms of the emotional wounds that probably they have, because many of these diseases start developing through these childhood wounds and all of this trauma that people have. Moreover, in that, let's say, in those years of life, in that season of life where there were wars, where people were completely different to how we are today, and we have much more emotional intelligence, let's say. We also have more knowledge and we have more open minds to speak about that. And probably in the 1900s or in the 1800s, people didn't have any kind of knowledge about many things. And talking about emotions was sometimes even taught as witchery
Oh,
or
wow.
there's magic and witchery and those things, and probably even talking about cults or things like that. So we need to do our research. You don't need to do a big research in terms of going back 100 years, but if you at least are curious about 3 years, 3 generations, let's say, before you can find out many things that happened to your parents, to your grandparents, and if you are lucky, to your great grandparents. And you can understand many things that you are repeating and you are taking now in your genes, in your body. And all of those things stay in you, because every emotion that we feel and every trauma that we experience, it's linked to an emotion, and that emotion is energy that in those times stay stuck, and it wasn't allowed to be expressed, it wasn't allowed to be healed or to be understood. So people develop several diseases, and also the medicine in those times was not advanced. So many people died about chronic diseases in those times. But now we have a lot of things that we can trace back and understand why those wounds happen and how
Mm-hmm.
we are reflecting those patterns. So I think that that would be a first big picture of how to start dealing with these intergenerational illnesses. No?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are more studies now. I think they were talking about that children and grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors are prone to be more, have more anxiety, more depression, that PTSD is still carried on through those generations, which is absolutely fascinating in that sense. And from more of a spiritual perspective, and I love working with the ancestors and our ancestral lineage. I actually do quite a lot of work with the ancestors and within the Akashic records, because if we look at even before we were born, we actually look at, or it is at least my belief that, at least for now, that we choose the lineage because of the limitations and because of the gifts that they already have. And I agree with you that, a lot of the disease is, stems from either a limiting belief, which then creates an emotion, which then we act on. And the power of our minds are absolutely incredible. And also, if we think about what our ancestors have been through in fighting wars, fighting famine, there's an aspect of that the emotions did get stuck because it wasn't safe to express them. So if we think about it, a lot of men went to war, and in order to survive war, they had to switch off their emotions to be effective, to protect the woman, to protect the children. So there was very much that closing off of that heart, in order to survive. It was a survival mechanism that, really was needed back then. And that expressing one's emotions sometimes was seen as weak as well, because it rendered you vulnerable in a place where you actually really didn't have that opportunity to be vulnerable, because it would have been dangerous. So we end up from generation to generation, picking up these habits, but repressing those emotions. And a lot of the times I believe that the soul chooses those generations to make a change within that. Right. So it's almost kind of like a lot of the times we're born to actually either reinforce some of these habits, these belief systems, or we're born to be nothing like them, which is a lot of the times how we start to break those genetic codes, in the sense of, I've been born into my mom's family or my dad's family to be nothing like them, because that doesn't work for me anymore, or that doesn't work for the society moving forward, or whatever it may be. So these are generations that come in to make those changes. So, for example, to allow those expression of emotions, to allow, whatever is there. But we start to see things like, say, for example, and this is just a very broad, cancer sometimes is linked to the repressed anger that has been suppressed throughout the generations, which then becomes resentment. And emotions are energy in motion. It needs to be expressed. There needs to be an outlet. Otherwise, it starts to cause some sort of a dysfunction or a backup in the body, which is then creates, whatever it might be. So depending on where the cancer for us tends to manifest or present, will kind of like, a lot of the times, and I'm also generally speaking, because people are just, we're so multidimensional. So for example, breast cancer, a lot of the times there is a repressed anger about certain aspects of being feminine, in not being able to step into that, or having these belief systems or these criteria that you've always believed you need to follow, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not, whatever it is that woman means to you, that you're not able to express yourself, ends up creating that repressed anger that has been passed down from generations to generations, depending on what that conformity was. And then it starts to present itself because we've created the conditions, the belief systems to overcome that and to heal that, which is, I find that to be quite interesting because I do a lot of somatic work, and I start to, one of the things that I really enjoy seeing is kind of like, what is the pattern that's coming in as well? And that's something that perhaps even you might even be able to see from human design. So looking at the human design of the parents, and you'll start to see that blueprint that the children started to choose from and what they've grabbed from each parent on a genetic level of what they've come to work with, which that I find quite fascinating because it brings up that map of, okay, this is what is happening. No, I know you do human design, and then Sarah Cahill, which has also been on one of our guests before, so check her out. She also does human design, but that's a great way to map the, I think, mental, emotional, and energetic lessons that we've come to experience and which tree it's come from, which I find very interesting from that perspective. And we also talk about, and I know very much Six Nations talks about that, about, you know, they always made decisions that would affect the next 7 generations moving forward. So we know that when we do our healing, it affects the generations before us because energetically it pulls on those genes for the others to do the work. It creates that space of healing for the generations that are here because we're all interconnected, especially since we're family. And it changes the generations to come because we start to exemplify something that is a different way of life, which I find that so fascinating to see that pattern of why the soul has chosen this specific lineage with all its wounds, with all its traumas, but with all its gifts as well. Right, which is we tend to focus only on the negative. Oh my goodness, I inherited this from my parents. But yeah, you also inherited a hell of a lot of awesome stuff. You know, that you know, if you're wanting to step into that in the sense of like, for example, for me, I was like, I want more discipline. Like, who in my family tree was known for that? Because energetically, I can switch on those genes. I can align to that energy. That is there, and yeah, that's my belief system. So I spend a lot of time in looking at those traumas and releasing that. And yes, a lot of the times it is our parents that create those traumas for us, and us as parents know that we're probably trying to minimize that for our children. But it's based on the belief systems that we've inherited that we're trying to do better. And yeah, it's I think we do the best that we can with what we know. And that even is important to understand that as, you know, a parent and as a child as well, is understanding that, okay, my mother didn't love me, not that that's my case, but in a lot of my clients that she didn't love me, and we're like, we blame them, but it's like she gave what she had. She didn't have that reference of love that we have at this moment. In that space. So it's knowing that our parents only gave us with what they knew, but we chose them because of that, because we've come to shift that a lot of the times.
Yeah, I love all that reflection that you made because I relate so much to that, and I have been working through human design and through understanding these bigger platforms, let's say, and bigger canvas that we can have when we observe how our date that we were born and how we chose all of those things and the conditions that you grew up in. And I was also thinking, well, if my parents wouldn't be as they were, with all the things that they had and with all the lack of emotional support that I didn't have, I wouldn't be the person that I am. And I wouldn't have developed the resilience to be responsible for many of the things that I am, although I am in a let's say in a heightened state that responsibility grow up,
Yeah.
and it's also not good. But you can also observe the good things that you pick up from that childhood experiences, and how you cope with that, and how it made you develop different kind of traits that made you overcome these kind of limitations that they had. But if you are more, if you go deeper, let's say, and you understand also their conditions and how they also have to overcome several struggles, obstacles, and things that their own parents did for them,
Mm-hmm.
then you could start to unfold a story that is a much healthier story and a much richer story that has a lot of things that you can pick up, such as you mentioned, just looking in your family tree, what are the positive characteristics that your parents had, instead of just looking for the bad things that they passed on you. You can also start looking for the positive, and from those you can construct your own, let's say, your own curriculum
Mm-hmm.
in order to grow up, in order to develop those traits and to create a different generation. And that doesn't mean that you have to be overprotective of the next generation. That just means that you have to understand what are the things that you can do for your own children in order for them to develop resiliency and to develop that kind of emotional maturity that you would have want in certain
Mm-hmm.
times of your life, no? Because it's a it's about becoming better each generation, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
about becoming weaker or let's say lazier. Because sometimes I see some parents that exaggerate in what they didn't have, and they want to
Mm-hmm.
pour too much to their own children. So they, instead of helping them, they what they do is that they create a generation that doesn't know what to do, because they
Mm-hmm.
haven't experienced any obstacle. And
Yeah.
you need the obstacles, you need the struggle, you need all of those things so that you can over start creating a different map in your mind, no?
You know, it's one thing I've come to learn, is that, so there's a few things that I want to say. So
Mm.
absolutely, our soul goes to the absolute extent to choose the date, the time, the city, the country, the parents. Our names we choose
Mm.
as well. Because I mean, these random names just come in, and I actually had a client, and this is so interesting, who was pregnant at the time,
Mhm.
and she had this name that she had for a long time, and during her pregnancy, her life was turned upside down. She was being sued. There was like conflict everywhere. There was just like, it was crazy. Her life was turned upside down, and in the records it said, "You need to change the name. You're not listening."
Mm.
And she, as soon as she changed the name of the baby, that was in alignment, everything resolved.
Oh my God.
I was just like, and it literally was within months. It was a simple, she says, that's the only thing that has changed,
Mm.
which I found incredible. But so every single frequency has a name and has an influence on the particular themes we've come to experience in our lives, which is
Mhm.
absolutely incredible. So it's by no, and a lot of the times people ask me, but what if I'm adopted?
Mm.
Right? And that for me, I find even more incredible, because there's a certain energetic imprint that happens. So not only do you take on, one set of genetics, like the family, but you take on two. So you take on your birth parents, and you take on your adoptive parents. And sometimes, in order to change the lineage frequencies of your birth parents, you have to be taken outside of that environment in order to change the collective conscious, the collective environment that's coming in. And you pick up, okay, you also pick up a whole bunch of limitations, but you have double the gifts, double the limitations. You're doing twice the work, which I find absolutely incredible for souls that have come in with that, besides exploring the theme of abandonment, because that always comes in one way or another. But going back to what you were saying, sorry, I just find all of this stuff so fascinating in the work that I've seen. And then we can even talk about like twins as well that come in and how that is different. But the aspect of, we grew up in hard times, we don't want our children to suffer. And I know that from my personal experience, and we try and give them the childhood we never had, or that our parents couldn't give us, or live through their eyes, kind of a thing. It was one of those things that it was just like, oh, I hear my mom saying, I wish I'd given you a better, upbringing. And then we try and do that because they've worked hard, they've facilitated our lives a little bit. So we try and facilitate that. But our children will look for trauma. They will look for it. Even if we do not, we pad them, they will find it, because this is why we're born on this planet. It's this planet of learning. When we're not, and it's not to be stuck in suffering all the time. It will happen naturally. So don't go looking for it. But it will happen. It will fall. But when it does fall on your lap, it's work through it, because we have that certain energy frequency that will pull those people towards us. But our children will explore their themes. And like you say, if we don't allow them to explore those themes that they've come to explore, we deny them the lesson, and it keeps coming back. Those opportunities for them to learn, and for us to learn, will keep coming back as well if we ignore our own lessons, right? So I find that quite fascinating. And when you were speaking, I remember a podcast from Joe Rogan that, I don't know if he was talking about Jordan Peterson, and he said, like, tough men create easy times, and easy times create weak men, which then create hard times, which then creates that cycle again. So hard times, create strong men, that then creates an easier, and it's these cycles that we move through. So it really is finding that balance between allowing kids to fall when they're walking and stand up again, and doing that in life, because we don't like seeing our children suffering, because we remember how we suffered. But sometimes that gives them that resilience that they need in life to figure things out as well. But I think we spend most of, at least until 7-14-21, and that happens in 7 years, learning, creating all of these layers, to then spend most of our life uncovering, unpeeling all of these conditioning that we've been given, that we've inherited, that we've chosen to experience as well. And you're right in the sense where I've started looking at that. So, a lot of the people that come to me are healers. They're a lot of empathic people. But empathy started in the space where they brought up a lot of the times in an unsafe environment. So it's taught them to read people's moods, to read people's energy, to know when to react, when to hide, when to be seen. And yes, that was scary, but what a wonderful gift it's given them in reading energy of people and being here to support other people. But it's a skill they wouldn't have learned had they not placed themselves in that environment, like on a soul level.
Yeah, actually, that's what I feel that happened to me. I had to develop that sense of being alert about things and being more aware of what was happening, not just with me, but with my brother, with my mom, with my dad, and all of those things. And now, when I meet anyone, I always sense the bigger picture faster than other people. And I sometimes I know how they are without even just with one conversation that I have with them.
Mm-hmm.
I can just pick up many things that from their behavior, from how they speak, from just one simple question that I can ask them, and from all of those things, you develop that awareness that protects you, but protects
Mm-hmm.
the whole family, let's say,
Yeah.
and in that way, that helps you also to forecast what might happen in your own life and be prepared for things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you are pessimistic, it's that you are realistic, and you look for the scenarios that can go wrong many times, or that's what happens to me, and
Mm-hmm.
you prepare before, so that when they arrive you don't suffer as much as other people, no? And you say, well, that's what you can do. And sometimes you even want to advise other people so that you can help them, but they don't understand, and they sometimes see that as control, no, as trying to control them. And you just tell them, well, I'm just telling you because I'm seeing that. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it, just wait and see what happens. No, that's your own choice. But it's so amazing how many of the skills that you develop with all of those struggling issues, environment, and things. And as you mentioned, Jordan and Joe Rogan, I was also listening to one podcast with Gabor Mate, and he was saying that the trauma is not what happened to you, it's how you live it. So
Yeah.
if you live the trauma with neglecting, with denying, with complaining, with victimizing, it can be much bigger than if you live the trauma with an attitude of what is this situation trying to tell me, trying to ask
Mm-hmm.
from me, or why is
Mm-hmm.
it happening to me, in terms of what do I need to develop in order to overcome
Mm-hmm.
the situation, no?
Yeah, and it's for me, I tend to look at it from the place of like, how is it working for me? So I actually noticed, cause, so I grew up in South Africa where our environment was quite dangerous, which created that opportunity to really understand your environment in and around you. And I only noticed that when I came from South Africa to Edinburgh. Just a quick sideline story. I was 21 when I first came traveling, and I remember meeting a friend of mine at a pub, and then I was working at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I really enjoyed work. So I knew that I would have to leave at about 5:30 to get to work because it was quite a long distance.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what the buses were, so I was like, no, I can walk there faster, and it was quite a beautiful walk. So I left her at the pub and I walked home by myself. And there was a stage where one of the places that I had to walk was in between a corridor of buildings. So like an alleyway, but not really. And then there was a main road in the front. Um, and it was so incredible that the skill that I had developed, because I was walking by myself, my hyper awareness of, I had three girls walking kind of slow in front of me. They were fine. I had two guys walking behind me. I already knew I could determine energetically the speed that everybody was walking in, the level of toxicity and how much they had drunken at that time. Had I been safe, I was already looking at outlets in plans of, if something happens, where will I run? Which would be to the main road where there are lots of people in the middle of the road, kind of a thing. My home was that way, which was a little bit darker. And I was like, nope, can't go there. But it was within seconds that I had already created that awareness of what was happening and around me, having, and I was like, this is nuts. I can breathe. even the people in the streets usually say to, like, if they're asking for money and you say, I don't have any, they're like, okay, have a good night, which is very different to the environment that I'd been brought up in. But I was like, what a wonderful gift. But it's not really great in those levels of stress that we're used to tolerating, that our body gets used to it. And that becomes very much a norm for us, right? Always having these kind of like, oh, the door's locked, all that kind of aspect that comes in. However, as doing the work that I'm doing, I've started realizing that some of the traumatic experiences that I've experienced and overcome, I think it's important to, like you were saying, it's feeling those feelings. And I talk about this 100%. Children teach us this. When they're angry, they're absolutely 100% angry. They scream, they shout, they do whatever it is that they need to do. When they're sad, they cry. When they're happy and they're joyful, they do. But they feel that feeling to that extent until it's like it's done. And then we condition them to, shh, it's okay, suck it up, kind of a thing. And that's where we start to learn to repress these. So the important bit is to feel the feelings 100%, but then let them go. Because I'm also a strong believer, if we continue to reiterate it, sometimes the body doesn't understand whether it's been or whether it's now, and it still becomes traumatizing. So by not dealing with it straight away, by not dealing with it completely, it continues to drive in that trauma because we keep speaking about it. We keep affirming it. We keep going through the same things over and over again. And I think it was Louise Hay had talked about it. She's like, you don't go into yesterday's trash to go get your dinner, to eat it. So it's like, absolutely, feel your feelings 100%, work through them. And sometimes, yes, we do need to work through them in layers. But as a healer, I start to find that we attract the people that are in alignment with us. And a lot of the times they have been through some of the same traumas or similar traumas to what we've been through, the healed aspect of it, which is, I find that quite fascinating. Do you find that with your patients? That sometimes they've gone through similar things than you?
Yeah. Yes, and also with people that I start not knowing when they are new in my life, or they start being friends, and then yes, also of course with patients. But it's so funny how each person in your life appears the stage that you are healing or you need to heal, and
Or
it
that you've healed?
yes, it
Yeah.
gives you that hint, that probably that small push that you need to heal completely about the issue that you are dealing with. And asking those questions, I think it's the most important thing, because you start recognizing that you are on the right path. No,
Yeah.
that attracting that person was not random, that was not
No.
on purpose, because life doesn't like you. It's just because you need to still heal certain things that you will perceive from a different perspective, because many times we are too immersed in the problem that we can't see, and we get stuck. So in
Yeah.
order to get unstuck or to start flowing again and moving, you find out another person that is different in many aspects, but it has the same issue that you need to heal.
Yeah.
And it shares a lot of characteristics from you, and it's just reflecting what you need to still deal with. And many times also to
Yeah.
appreciate many, sometimes it's not that you need to heal something probably, but is that you need to appreciate and be grateful for what you have, and
Yeah.
from what you have already done. And that's just probably closure. I don't know, because I'm almost there, I think, about healing one of these traumas I'm still working on that. But I will tell you in some couple of months what happens in my case. and it will be really, really interesting because I think that that's really amazing how the universe and
Hmm.
the collective energy, the ancestral
Yeah.
things start working together
Yeah.
in order to give you the pieces of your puzzle, and you start aligning those pieces and you start understanding the map or seeing the image that you need to see. But probably you are not in that stage where you can be grateful. So when that last person arrives, I think that's my theory,
Hmm.
is for you to be grateful.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is a big part of it as well.
Mm.
Forgiving kind of like our ancestors for creating some of these limitations or these conditionings. It becomes quite important, I think. And yeah, forgiveness is rarely about the other person and more about ourselves. It allows us to really move through understanding ourselves, understanding our patterns, understanding our limitations, the stories. A lot of the times, it's a story that we tell ourselves of whatever it is, I'm not good enough, or I'm dumb, or whatever it is, cancel, cancel, cancel. But it's like, it's one of those things where what is the story I'm telling? What is the trigger? And where did it come from? And a lot of the times I also say to my clients when they were going through something, I'm like, how old did you feel when you were in that confrontation? They're like, oh, I felt like a little girl at about 5. That will that will like activate that trauma, you know, when somebody said you're a bad girl, I don't want to be bad. Like, where does that start from? Where does that stem from? And that is a conditioning that has been taught. I mean, when we're feeding our children when they're babies, we're feeding them not only food but our conditioning, because it's been inherited. And yeah, I think it's important to work through that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you've uncovered about yourself, because yeah, I tend to, now that I've gotten this understanding, I start trying to find the patterns. Where did it go? Well, and I'll be like, oh my goodness, my mom used to do this, or my grandmother did it to my mom. I remember that because I lived with my grandmother. But now what's happening is I actually have that discussion because my kid's a little bit older. And I mean, like, oh my goodness, I've discovered that this is a pattern that I've been carrying subconsciously, and I
Mhm.
share it. And I'm like, and now to choose to continue to do it is not unconscious, it's a choice,
Mhm.
right? So, and it's not about beating ourselves up about the past, but it's really looking, again, we would be traumatizing ourselves because a lot of the times we meet ourselves with judgment, right? And we don't even know that we're doing what we're doing because it's unconscious. So the deal is, once it becomes conscious, there's an understanding, there's a forgiveness of self, there's a gratitude for the person that highlighted that to us, because usually they're the ones that we shock with, that we have that altercation, that confrontation with. The
Mhm.
Those are the biggest teachers in our lives, I've started to learn.
Yeah.
The bullies, the people that hurt us so deeply are our biggest teachers. And if we look at it from a spiritual contract perspective, we've asked them to show up in that way, to
Mhm.
teach us that lesson, to give us that opportunity, and we're providing the same thing for them at that time as well. We start to look at it. There's nothing that happens by accident. But yeah, so I started bringing that in discussing that with my daughters, and two of them are so different from each other. So one has
Mhm.
definitely changed that pattern completely in the opposite direction. And then the other one is the same. So it's kind of like, where do we find that middle ground between us? And sometimes it's needing to be one way or the other, but it's kind of like fascinating to notice the patterns and how they're changing it or how they're enforcing it, because we've conditioned them in that way, right? Which is interesting to watch from a space of observation. So I've tried to accelerate it by not only having that conversation with the generation before me, which is my mom, but having it with the generations that are still to come. So I was like, oh my goodness, I've noticed this. And then we actually had a discussion And the last one, which was all around people pleasing and how it's conditioned, especially as women, as girls, is what and then speaking to a cousin of mine, and she's like, I'm going through the same thing, or I'm feeling guilty for not putting other people ahead of myself, but I need to put my family ahead. And how do I manage all of this? And I was like, well, we're going through the same thing, because we start genetically, that energetic pool starts to shift within our siblings, because our energy is, so they're the direct link next to us, right? So it will pull them one way or another. And sometimes they will dig their heels and say, no, no, I want to keep this pattern, which is why we argue, or they have a fear for you. And they're like, don't do that, you're going to get hurt, and it's kind of like, no, it's okay. I can choose a life that isn't being X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go off on my own, because I'm making the changes within the lineage. And then you're showing them it's okay, and then they'll be like, oh, maybe it is okay to do what I want to do and not what my parents want me to do, or my grandparents, or, kind of a thing. So I just find it also fascinating and so multifaceted, which is beautiful to see where these patterns, and I definitely see them within myself for sure. And yes, my friends, my clients, the people around me usually come to bring up a lot of the pattern that we're going through as well, which is beautiful.
Yes, it is so amazing how also the synchronicities start working in that way,
Mhm.
because my daughter was feeling that she didn't belong during the weekend, and she had a hard time adapting with her friends, because sometimes she feels that her friends reject her.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even know why, because in that age it's also difficult to construct a dialogue, or to really tell the why you don't like certain people. And I was feeling the same way in those days. I mean, I first told her mom that I was feeling like that, and then she told her mom the same thing in two different backgrounds, no? But I said, I spoke with her yesterday, and I told her that we many times we are conditioned by society to be accepted by everyone, and not everyone has to accept us the way we are, because many times they don't even understand themselves.
Yeah.
So they don't understand what they are rejecting, and they sometimes reflect what their own parents, in terms of children,
Mm-hmm.
and many times reflect what their own parents are rejecting, or the environment
Yeah.
that they are living in. So it's the best way to act. And what I just told her is the the only thing that you can do is ask your friend. Well, first recognize that you are hurt by what she's
Mm-hmm.
doing. I mean, just tell her that you don't feel good because she's rejecting you, and you would like to know why she's rejecting you. And try her, or give her some time to think about that, or to tell you directly what is happening, if she knows.
Mm-hmm.
No? If she doesn't answer you, or if she just doesn't want to give you the answer, just understand that anyone that doesn't accept you as you are is not really your friend.
Mm-hmm.
So try to understand that many people will pass in your life, and you are very small, of course. You are just 10 years, and you will find many people in your life that won't understand you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not you, it's also about them. It's also about don't understanding themselves, or rejecting certain parts of you because they match with something that they don't like about themselves.
Yeah.
No, and that's what I also lived in my own childhood. I didn't have too much friends. I just had one friend through the elementary school. I just had one friend through the high school. So I wasn't popular, let's say. And I felt different. And many people told me, you are just different. You are just like whatever. And in terms of not liking the popular things. And that sense of belonging also has to do with the lineage that you need to understand and that you need to adapt to the conditions that you are living. Because if not, you will start to feel it in your body, and your body will start telling you, giving you symptoms, no? That is the expression of those ancestral wounds or childhood wounds or things that you need to understand, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's once you start to recognize them, then yeah, you can start to work with them for sure, for sure. And I'm with my daughters, I have one that is, and I've said this so many times this week, I was like, oh my goodness, she is my child, as in the sense of all those patterns that are coming in of like, I totally understand that. And how do I bring balance? Because my other daughter is the total opposite, which I also very much identify with, but is bringing in that those balances for the two where they are both okay with that. And I find that so interesting in that sense of that needing to belong. And one of the things I've always said to my daughters, or try to remind them, is that you don't need to like everybody, and not everybody needs to like you either. And it's becoming comfortable with that, which is important. So I was the opposite from you, in the sense where I was in with all the groups because I could adapt, because that was my resilience in adapting to my environment, which I found very interesting, because in high school we had very much kind of like a division between the jocks, the artistic kids, the smokers, the bad kids. We all wore uniforms, very much part of that. So I did sports, I did art, and I smoked at that time. So I was kind of like in between, okay with all of those, and then the academics as well. So I was just enough to pass. But it was one of those things where you're so malleable and adaptable that you don't know who you are. You're just so easy to go with the flow that you end up losing yourself within that, losing one's identity, because you become everything to everyone. And it's not that it would be, I was just easygoing. It wasn't necessarily that it was one of those things where I would change my personality. I don't think I did. That it would just be easy to adapt because I liked so many things and I was so curious, which is so interesting from that perspective, because it exposed me and I learned a lot. And there was always very much that kind of like, how do it's responsibility, knowing exactly what's not good for me, what is, and again, being able to read the situations is being able to get in and get out of them as quickly as you've gotten in, was one of the resilience things that I had acquired at that time, which was, I'm so grateful for that now. In the beginning, it was one of those things where it was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I put myself in those situations. But now I look at it and going, well, I was, it created the opportunity to get out of those situations very, very quickly too, which was great. It just, nothing really like that bad, but kind of like going clubbing in downtown Johannesburg, thinking that I had a lift, and then the person left without me, and then it was like, how do I get home? Kind of a thing to walk through. It's almost like walking by myself at 18, walking 12 blocks through a city center. That is crazy, but it's just like, it was one of those things. But yeah, we build this resilience. It's part of the themes we've come to experience. I think the themes are quite interesting because of that intergenerational, I call it the gene palette. like as if you're painting a picture, like all these like genetics that we've chosen, and I believe we even choose what we look like. So it's like for next lifetime, I'm hopefully going to be a little bit taller than what I am in this lifetime. But
Like
then
that.
again, so it is just like actually, yeah. So it's incredible that palette that we've chosen because it builds what we need, for the theme that we're wanting to explore. So yeah, I did and this is probably off topic. I did an astrology chart reading for both my daughters,
Mhm.
to see what is, and it was an evolutionary astrology because they very much, it's a science to understand what their soul has come to achieve in this lifetime and how I can work with them and how I can support them through that. And I got to understand how different they both were and what their needs were and what their lessons were in this lifetime that they've chosen. So I found that to be quite fascinating too. So I'd recommend that either human design or a astrological chart reading, and then combine it with why they chose you. That would also support as well in guiding them too.
Yes, I also agree with that perspective that astrology can give you, in addition
Mm-hmm.
to human design. I think that human design is just like the mastery level, to understand yourself and to have
Mm-hmm.
the whole picture and deep. It's extremely deep in terms of that you can have a profile in 150 pages
Mm-hmm.
of your own profile. So
Yeah.
just absorbing that kind of information is overwhelmingly too much. Is too much.
Yeah.
But
There's a
having,
lot of,
yeah,
yeah, sorry. There's
no.
quite a few modalities, I mean, that are quite interesting when it comes to that with like human design. There's astrology. These are all sciences.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lady that I know who's really good, and she does what's called your human pin code, which is, I think it was actually developed in South Africa, and she's brilliant because she starts looking at the numbers and how they correspond and what numbers you are in the different aspects of your life. So it's similar to numerology, but not quite numerology. There's quite a bit of psychology that comes in behind there as well, of the different numbers showing up in the different areas of your life. So there's that. There's Vedic astrology as well, which I find to be very, very accurate too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the Indian astrology. So it's fascinating. There's so many opportunities to really get to know who we are, and I think that's our purpose in life, is to get to know who we are.
Exactly. Understanding first ourselves and then being curious about how our parents were and what they suffer. All of those things will create the map that you need to accept the things that happen to you and to understand when each person in your life will be presenting, and to create that awareness, no, to create
Mm-hmm.
that awareness at that, and that compassionate look about what is happening to you, and not taking the victim mode, but
Mm-hmm.
taking more the proactive mode, and using those tools to change yourself and to overcome these limitations that will be highlighted for sure in any astrology map or any human design uh, chart. No,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that we can wrap up all this information
Mm-hmm. That was a good summary.
into how all of those things uh, are expressed in our bodies many times if we don't pay attention. So I think that every time we ignore that and we just live life in a, let's say, in a surviving mode, we start just, instead of healing those wounds, instead of healing that ancestral lineage, you
Mm.
create more, and you entangle more the things that your own children will have to work with. So just pay attention to what your body is telling you, because your body will always highlight those things for you. Any kind of symptom that you are having is, now we are very close to saying that many of the diseases that we experience are just created by the emotions that we repressed and the things that we left behind in terms of not telling them or saying them. And so what I just can recommend to people is pay attention to your body, connect more with your body, and allow the healing process to happen. Don't be desperate about trying to heal quickly. Just allow your own body to have the space and the resilience and the strength to heal the disease. Of course, I'm talking about diseases that you can handle, not any kind of acute or very extreme disease. No.
Yeah, that needs support as well. Sometimes you need to heal the body to allow the emotions to heal as well, right?
Yeah.
Which is important too. Yeah. So thank you very much for that summary. I've really enjoyed talking about ancestral healing and how it manifests within the body. So thank you so much. I hope it was helpful to everyone. And yeah, absolutely. If there's anything you'd like us to discuss from a physical, metaphysical, mental, emotional level, absolutely let us know. And yeah, we're happy to help. And yeah, if you want to be a guest, if you're a healer or if you're in this kind of realm, absolutely reach out to David or I below. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing night. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, everyone. And ask us questions. Give us your feedback. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.